sending a sonogram to the wrong number is profoundly embarrassing. Getting an immediate reply from New York's most elusive billionaire claiming the unborn child is his and that he is hunting you down is utterly terrifying, especially when your doctor warns that the baby's heartbeat defies all known human biology. Fluorescent lights hummed a sterile, irritating tune inside Examination Room 4 at Mount Sinai Hospital on the Upper East Side. Cyrene Hunter sat on the edge of the crinkling paper of the examination table, her fingers trembling as she held a glossy strip of thermal paper. 8 weeks. She stared at the grainy black and white image, her mind struggling to process the tiny, bean-shaped anomaly nestled within the static. She was a 28-year-old junior architect at Gensler, one of Manhattan's top firms. Her life was a meticulously drafted blueprint of deadlines, oat milk lattes, and late nights staring at AutoCAD. Motherhood was nowhere on the schematic, and yet the proof was right in her hands. Linda, the seasoned ultrasound technician with tired eyes and a badge that read 30 years of service, had been unusually quiet during the procedure. She had frowned at the GE Volison monitor, her stylus tapping the screen repeatedly as if recalibrating the machine. "The measurements are unusual," Linda had muttered, adjusting the transducer on Cyrene's abdomen. "The crown rump length is typical for 8 weeks. But the cardiac activity, it's exceptionally robust. I've never heard a resting fetal heart rate this fast, nor this heavy. I'm going to have Dr. Montgomery review these scans immediately." Cyrene hadn't cared about the medical anomalies at that moment. She was too consumed by the sheer impossibility of her situation. She hadn't been on a date in 6 months. Her last relationship had ended amiably over a disagreement about apartment sizes. There was only one night, one hazy, unexplainable night out of time that could have led to this. 2 months ago, Cyrene had attended a high-profile leukemia charity gala at the Pierre Hotel, representing her firm after her boss fell ill. It was a suffocating event filled with hedge fund managers and real estate tycoons. That was where she met him, Dondre Reed, CEO of Reed Sovereign Trust, a man whose wealth was entirely old money and whose public appearances were so rare they were almost mythical. He was striking in a way that made the rest of the opulent ballroom look like a cheap stage set. Pale, with eyes the color of forged steel, he had approached her near the ice sculpture, bypassing a dozen socialites to ask her opinion on the structural integrity of the hotel's vaulted ceiling. Their conversation had flowed effortlessly, pulling Cyrene into a strange, intoxicating gravity. She remembered drinking a single glass of vintage Bollinger champagne. She remembered Dondre's hand resting against the small of her back, his skin unnervingly cool through the silk of her dress. She remembered his intense gaze tracking the pulse at her throat, and then, nothing. The rest of the night was a blackout. Cyrene had woken up the next morning in her own bed in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, still wearing her gala dress, perfectly tucked in. She had no hangover, only a strange metallic taste in her mouth and 2 perfectly circular, faint bruises on her collarbone that she dismissed as an allergic reaction to a new necklace. Later that afternoon, she had received a text from an unknown number. "Ensure you drink plenty of water today. D. Reed." But she had hastily saved the contact as Dondre and never replied, too mortified by her lack of memory to engage. She assumed she had drunkenly embarrassed herself and that the billionaire was just being exceptionally polite. Now, sitting in the cold hospital room, the gravity of that night crashed down on her. Cyrene needed her sister. Daniela was her anchor, the pragmatic older sibling who always knew how to fix things. Pulling her iPhone 15 from her leather tote bag, Cyrene opened her messages. Her hands were shaking so violently that she could barely type. "It's real. I'm pregnant. I'm absolutely terrified. The doctor says the heartbeat is weird. Please call me as soon as you see this." She snapped a photo of the sonogram, attached it to the text, and hit send. She let out a long, shaky breath, waiting for the familiar, delivered notification. As her eyes drifted to the top of the screen to confirm the recipient, the blood drained from her face, leaving her entirely numb. The name at the top of the chat wasn't Daniela, because both contacts started with D and had been recently active in her phone. iOS had placed them side by side. In her panicked, trembling state, Cyrene had tapped the wrong icon. The message had been sent to Dondre. No, 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 Cyrene gasped, jabbing her finger at the screen to unsend it. But the hospital's Wi-Fi was aggressively fast. The message was already marked red. A profound, suffocating silence filled the examination room. Cyrene stared at her phone as if it were an unpinned grenade. What would a billionaire do? Would he sue her? Accuse her of extortion? Call his lawyers to draft a non-disclosure agreement and a termination clause? 3 gray dots appeared. He was typing. The dots vanished. Then they reappeared. Cyrene's own heart hammered wildly against her ribs. A single message popped onto the screen. That is my child. Do not move from your location. I am coming for you. Cyrene dropped the phone. It clattered against the linoleum floor. That is my child. He didn't question it. He didn't ask for a paternity test. He didn't accuse her of lying. He knew. How could he possibly be so certain? Panic, primal and overwhelming, seized her. She couldn't wait here. She couldn't face a man with limitless resources who somehow knew the impossible secrets of a night she couldn't even remember. She grabbed her phone, shoved the sonogram into her bag, and practically ran out of examination room 4. Miss Hunter. Doctor. Aris Montgomery called out as she bolted past the nurse's station, holding a thick file. Miss Hunter, wait. We need to discuss your blood work. I have to go, Cyrene shouted back, bursting through the double doors and out onto 5th Avenue. The crisp autumn air of Manhattan hit her lungs, but it did nothing to clear her head. She hailed a yellow cab, throwing herself into the back seat. Brooklyn. Cobble Hill. Clinton Street, please. Fast. As the cab sped down the FDR drive, Cyrene's phone began to vibrate incessantly. She ignored it, watching the city blur by. She needed to pack a bag. She needed to get to Daniela's house in Connecticut. She just needed to run. The cab pulled up to Cyrene's brownstone on Clinton Street 40 minutes later. She shoved a $20 bill at the driver and scrambled up the stoop, her keys jingling violently in her hand. She lived on the 2nd floor, a modest 1-bedroom apartment that suddenly felt like a trap rather than a sanctuary. She unlocked the heavy wooden front door of the building and stepped into the foyer. You did not stay where I told you to stay. The voice was smooth, resonant, and entirely too calm for the situation. Cyrene froze, a cold sweat breaking out across her spine. Standing in the dimly lit hallway, perfectly framed by the vintage wainscoting, was Dondre Reed. He wore a bespoke Brioni suit that looked black in the shadows but was likely a deep, impossible navy. He didn't look like a man who had just rushed across a congested city. Not a single hair was out of place, and his breathing was imperceptible. How? Cyrene choked out, taking a step backward toward the door. How are you here? I just left the hospital. I have resources, Cyrene, Dondre said, stepping forward. His movements were fluid, lacking the microscopic hesitations of normal human motion. When you fled Mount Sinai, I took the liberty of coming to your residence. I own the holding company that purchased this building last week. You bought my building? Cyrene's voice pitched higher, a hysterical edge creeping in. Why? Because we slept together? I don't even remember sleeping with you. Dondre's expression softened, though his eyes remained incredibly sharp. Let us go upstairs. We have much to discuss, and a public hallway is not the venue for the reality you are about to face. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm calling the police. Cyrene reached for her phone. Before her thumb could even graze the screen, Dondre was suddenly inches from her. He hadn't run, He had simply crossed the 10 feet of space between them in a fraction of a second. Cyrene gasped, dropping her keys. He didn't touch her. He just looked down at her, his immense height casting a shadow over her trembling frame. "Call them, if it brings you comfort," he said quietly. "But they cannot protect you from what is growing inside you. Only I can do that. Please, Cyrene." Upstairs, defeated by a mixture of terror and an unnatural compulsion to comply with his calm authority, Cyrene nodded. She picked up her keys and led him up the creaking stairs to her apartment. Once inside, she dropped her bag on the kitchen island and put the width of the counter between them. Dondre remained near the door, surveying the space. He looked entirely out of place among her IKEA furniture and drafted floor plans scattered across the dining table. "Explain," Cyrene demanded, crossing her arms tightly to hide her shaking. "How did you know the baby was yours without a test? And what did you do to me at the gala?" "I did not assault you, if that is what you fear," Dondre began, pacing slowly toward the living room window. "The memory loss is a natural side effect of my biology, a localized venom transferred through saliva and contact. It acts as an amnestic agent to protect our anonymity." Cyrene stared at him, her brain short-circuiting. "Venom, are you listening to yourself? You're a hedge fund CEO, not a reptile." "I am the sovereign of the Reed bloodline," Dondre corrected, turning to face her. "My kind does not wear capes, sleep in coffins, or burn in the sun, Cyrene. We are an apex predatory offshoot of humanity. We control equity funds, private islands, and global pharmaceutical companies like Aegis BioLife to synthesize our food supply. We are ancient, we are wealthy, and we are heavily mutated. You would call me a vampire." Cyrene let out a sharp, breathless laugh. "You're insane. You're actually delusional." "Am I?" Dondre tilted his head. "Call your doctor, the one you ran away from. Ask him about your blood work." Cyrene hesitated. Her phone had been buzzing in her pocket for the last 10 minutes. She pulled it out. 5 missed calls from Dr. Aris Montgomery. Keeping her eyes locked on Dondre, she dialed the hospital. Aris picked up on the first ring. "Cyrene." "Thank God." Dr. Montgomery's voice was strained, bordering on panic. "Are you somewhere safe? You need to come back to the emergency room immediately." "Why?" "Aris, what's going on?" "Your blood work," the doctor stammered. "Cyrene, your HCG levels, the pregnancy hormones, they aren't doubling every 2 days like a normal pregnancy. They are doubling every 45 minutes. Your red blood cells are mutating. We found traces of a heavy, unknown protein binding to your DNA. Linda was right about the fetal heartbeat. It's beating at 300 beats per minute. Cyrene, whatever is inside you, it's metabolizing at a rate that human biology cannot sustain." The phone slipped slightly in her sweaty grip. She looked at Dondre, who stood perfectly still, listening. He could hear every word. "I'll come in later, Aris," Cyrene whispered, and hung up before the doctor could protest further. The silence in the apartment was deafening. "A pure-blood conception," Dondre stated, his voice dropping an octave, echoing with a strange, possessive reverence. "It has not happened in 400 years. Our genetics are exceedingly aggressive, Cyrene. Hematophagic cell structures. The child will require vast amounts of energy to develop. In a normal human woman, the fetus would consume the mother entirely within a month." "Consume me?" Cyrene stepped back, bumping into the refrigerator. Tears finally spilled over her lashes. "And why did you do this to me? If it's going to kill me, why?" "Because it will not kill you," Dondre said, stepping around the counter, closing the distance between them. He stopped just a breath away, looking down at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I orchestrated our meeting at the pier. I reviewed your medical files when you donated blood 3 years ago. You possess the RF null blood type, golden blood." Cyrene swallowed hard. She knew she had a rare blood type, The Red Cross called her twice a year begging for donations. Your blood lacks all 51 rantigens, Dondre explained, reaching out to gently brush a tear from her cheek. His touch sent a shocking jolt of electricity through her skin. It makes you a universal donor for humanity, but to my kind, it makes you the only viable incubator in the world. Your immune system will not attack the child's aggressive cells. You are the only woman alive who can carry my heir to term. Cyrene felt the room spin. The blueprints, the oat milk, the life she knew it was all disintegrating, replaced by the terrifying reality of the monster standing in her kitchen, claiming ownership of her body. "So I'm just a vessel to you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You are the mother of the Reed dynasty," Dondre replied, his eyes flashing with a sudden predatory gold. "And you are coming home with me." Within 2 hours, Cyrene's ordinary life was entirely erased. She was escorted, though it felt more like a highly coordinated abduction, into the sleek, leather-lined interior of a Sikorsky S-76 helicopter waiting at the East 34th Street heliport. Dondre sat opposite her, his posture rigid and impossibly still as the sprawling, neon-lit grid of Manhattan fell away beneath them. They tracked north along the Hudson River, heading toward the secluded money enclaves of Cold Spring, New York. Cyrene spent the 30-minute flight curled into the corner of her seat, her hands resting protectively over her completely flat stomach. The absurdity of it all warred with the stark, terrifying reality. Her heart raced, but she could also feel a strange secondary flutter deep within her abdomen. A rapid, almost mechanical thrumming that made her breath hitch. The child was already growing at a terrifying velocity. The helicopter descended onto a floodlit helipad on the grounds of a sprawling, brutalist fortress made of glass, steel, and dark stone, nestled deep within a heavily forested private mountain. "Welcome to the Reed estate," Dondre said, unbuckling his harness as the rotors whined down. "The perimeter is secured by private military contractors, and the interior is staffed entirely by my inner circle. You are completely safe here." "Safe from what?" Cyrene asked, her voice raspy. "You just told me I'm carrying a mutant apex predator." "Safe from the others," he replied smoothly, offering a hand that she pointedly ignored as she stepped out onto the tarmac. Inside, the estate was a marvel of modern architecture, looking more like a high-tech medical research facility blended with a luxury resort than a home. Cyrene was immediately taken to a subterranean medical wing outfitted with diagnostic equipment that made Mount Sinai look archaic. Waiting for them was a team of doctors wearing scrubs branded with the Aegis BioLife logo, Dondre's pharmaceutical front. The lead physician, a severe-looking woman named Dr. Panet. Evelyn Cross immediately began hooking Cyrene up to a series of intravenous lines. "Your caloric and iron needs will increase exponentially every 12 hours, Miss Hunter," Dr. Cross explained, a tone devoid of bedside manner. She hung a bag of thick, dark red fluid on the IV pole. "Normal food will no longer sustain the fetal development. We have synthesized a nutrient-dense hemoglobin compound. It will bypass your digestive system and go directly to the placenta. Without this, the child would begin harvesting your organs for calcium and protein by tomorrow morning." Cyrene squeezed her eyes shut as the cold fluid tracked up her arm. "This is a nightmare. This is survival," Dondre corrected, standing in the doorway of the medical suite. "And we have a complication." Cyrene opened her eyes, panic spiking. "Is it the baby?" "No. It is the information." Dondre stepped into the room, holding a sleek tablet. "Your panicked exit from Mount Sinai was noted. Furthermore, Dr. Aris Montgomery violated HIPAA protocols. In his frenzy to understand your mutated blood work, he uploaded your cellular scans to an international hematology database for peer review. He did it anonymously, but my cyber division tracked the IP. Aris wouldn't do that to hurt me," Cyrene defended weakly. "He's a scientist." He was confused. His intentions are irrelevant. The result is catastrophic, Dondre stated, his jaw clenching. The Reed bloodline is the oldest and wealthiest, but we are not the only ones. The Volkov Syndicate, a heavily militarized faction based out of St. Petersburg and operating heavily in the Brooklyn shipping yards, has been monitoring global medical databases for anomalies. They have been trying to breed a pureblood for a century. They have seen your scans. Cyrene felt the blood drain from her face. They know about me. They know a woman with R-null blood is carrying a highly advanced fetal mutation, Dondre said. And they know she was last seen in Brooklyn. They will tear the city apart looking for you. If they find you, they will not kill you, Cyrene. They will extract the child to raise as a weapon, and they will keep you alive in a laboratory to breed their own heirs until your body gives out. A choked sob escaped Cyrene's throat. She was trapped in a war she hadn't known existed 24 hours ago. I won't let them touch you, Dondre promised, the gold ring around his irises flaring brilliantly. It was a terrifying display of his non-human nature, yet in that moment, it was the only thing making Cyrene feel secure. But you must trust me. You must drink the supplements. You must stay within the titanium core of this estate. For the next 3 weeks, Cyrene lived in a gilded cage. The pregnancy accelerated at a monstrous pace. By week 2, she looked 6 months pregnant. By week 3, her skin was pale and stretched tight over a massive hardened belly. The synthesized hemoglobin kept her alive, but she was perpetually exhausted, her body working in overdrive to incubate the sovereign heir. She learned the rhythms of the estate. Dondre rarely slept. He spent hours in his command center, coordinating with his global security forces to keep the Volkov Syndicate off their scent. He would visit her every evening, sitting by her bedside, placing a cool, pale hand on her stomach. The baby, which was usually a tempest of violent kicks that bruised Cyrene's ribs, would instantly calm at Dondre's touch. Despite her initial terror, Cyrene found herself studying him. He wasn't a mindless monster. He was a king burdened by an ancient legacy, fiercely protective of the family they had accidentally created. Then, on the 24th day of her captivity, the power in the estate went completely dead. The silence that followed the power failure was absolute, heavy, and unnatural. Even the backup generators, housed in a separate reinforced bunker, failed to kick in. The medical monitors hooked to Cyrene's arms went black. The only light came from the emergency red LED strips lining the floorboards of her suite. Dondre was in her room before she could even sit up. He didn't use the door. He simply appeared from the shadows, moving with a terrifying, silent speed. "Do not speak," he whispered, lifting her effortlessly from the bed. He pulled a heavy tactical blanket over her protruding belly. They bypassed the localized grid. "It's an EMP. The Volkovs are here. How did they find us?" Cyrene gasped, clinging to his broad shoulders. "A mole," Dondre gritted out, his voice vibrating with barely contained fury. "Aegis BioLife has been compromised. Dr. Cross sent encrypted telemetry data of your vitals out of the compound." He carried her down a labyrinth of hidden maintenance corridors, the darkness absolute to human eyes, though Dondre navigated it without hesitation. Gunfire erupted in the floors above them, not standard ammunition, but the heavy, concussive boom of high-explosive incendiary rounds designed to tear through enhanced flesh. "Alistair," Dondre barked as they reached a reinforced steel door in the sub-basement. A tall man with a severe buzz cut stepped out of the shadows, a massive customized assault rifle strapped to his chest. "Sir, they breached the western perimeter. We have 30 hostiles inside the main house. They are heavily armed and fast. Hold the choke point at the grand staircase. Do not let them reach the vault," Dondre ordered. He pushed Cyrene behind the steel door, revealing a panic room lined with lead and titanium. "Dondre, wait." Cyrene cried out, grabbing his arm. A sharp, blinding pain ripped through her abdomen, forcing her to double over. A warm rush of fluid soaked her thighs. The baby. It's happening. Right now. Dondre froze. The timing was disastrous. The stress and adrenaline flooding Cyrene's system had triggered the final stage of the accelerated gestation. Alistair, lock the vault. Now, Dondre commanded, stepping back inside the panic room with Cyrene. The massive door hissed shut, sealing them in a soundproof tomb just as the distant sound of an explosion shook the foundation. Cyrene collapsed onto a medical cot in the corner of the vault, screaming as a contraction tore through her body. It didn't feel like human labor. It felt like her bones were being crushed from the inside out. Look at me, Cyrene, Dondre urged, kneeling beside her. His aristocratic veneer was completely gone, replaced by a primal, terrifying intensity. He bit his own wrist, drawing thick, dark blood, and pressed it to her lips. Drink. It will numb the pain and give you strength. You need my cells in your bloodstream to survive the final push. Repulsed but desperate, Cyrene swallowed the metallic liquid. Almost instantly, a rush of cold fire surged through her veins. The agonizing pain dulled to a heavy pressure, and her vision sharpened dramatically. The vault door suddenly dented inward with a deafening clang. The Volkovs had bypassed the guards. They were using hydraulic battering rams. Push, Cyrene, Dondre ordered, turning his head toward the buckling door. His fangs fully descended, his eyes blazing like miniature suns. Give me my heir, and I will show them why the Reed name is feared. Cyrene screamed, gripping the rails of the cot, bearing down with a strength she didn't know she possessed. The blood she had ingested fueled her muscles, pushing her far past human limits. With a final, earth-shattering cry, the pressure vanished. There was no crying, only a heavy, wet, impossibly fast heartbeat echoing in the small room. Dondre caught the child in a sterile towel. It was a boy, pale and perfectly formed, his eyes already open and glowing with a faint predatory gold. Selang. The hinges on the vault door screamed as the metal began to tear. Dondre placed the infant on Cyrene's chest. The moment the baby touched her, he rooted against her, instinctively seeking the warmth of his mother. Stay in the corner, Dondre said softly, wiping a smear of blood from Cyrene's forehead. He stood up, turning his back to her, facing the failing door. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, letting it drop to the floor. The titanium door ripped open. 6 heavily armed operatives in tactical gear flooded the threshold, their weapons raised. What happened next was a blur of supernatural violence. Dondre didn't use weapons. He moved faster than Cyrene's newly enhanced eyes could track. He became a force of pure, brutal physics. He shattered the first man's sternum with a single palm strike, using the operative's body as a shield against the incoming gunfire. He moved through the squad like a scythe through wheat, tearing weapons from their hands and breaking limbs with sickening, echoing snaps. In less than 10 seconds, the threat was neutralized. The Volkov operatives lay broken on the floor outside the vault. Dondre stood amidst the carnage, his white dress shirt ruined, his chest heaving as he stared down the dark corridor to ensure no others were coming. He slowly turned back to the vault, his golden eyes settling on Cyrene and the child. The monster receded, replaced once again by the billionaire sovereign. He walked back into the room, kneeling beside the cot. He brushed a finger over the baby's cheek. "You did it," Dondre whispered, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "You are incredible." Cyrene looked at the terrifying, powerful man before her, then down at the extraordinary child in her arms. She was no longer just an architect from Brooklyn. She was the mother of the Reed heir, the universal donor, the queen of a hidden empire. She had survived the impossible, and looking at the fiercely loyal predator guarding her, she realized she held the ultimate power in this dangerous new world. His name is Julian, Cyrene said, her voice steady and commanding in the quiet vault. Dondre bowed his head in deference. As you wish, my queen. But if you were captivated by Cyrene's terrifying plunge into the supernatural elite and Dondre's fierce, predatory protection of his bloodline, this story is for you. The hidden world of billionaire vampires is full of secrets, betrayal, and dark romance. Hit that like button, share this story with your fellow dark romance lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling supernatural sagas.